Early in 2017, I was approached by a person in possession of a hard drive.
One of the words that decided us to do what we've done is that it was in the public interest, and that the country as a whole really needed to get this information.
Having looked at these emails, my feeling is that President Zuma isn't running this country. Others are running this country.
Hi.
Susan, yeah, I wanted to know when you guys received the hard drive, you got the hard drive, and Ghani.
We got the hard drive via Brian Curran, which would have been in kind of early 2017.
Series of explosive emails have been made public in South Africa revealing how the ruling ANC no longer controls the state apparatus.
The evidence suddenly is there, and it says you're not just right, it's far worse than you thought it was.
This is big. This is massive. And you get goosebumps. And then you also enter into that realm of fear.
I try to describe to people all the time what it's like to be inside those emails. You kind of feel the revoltingness sort of rise up your esophagus as you go along.
And when Jacob Zuma stands down, the people will stand up again. And we will take control back of our country, comrades.
Those who are responsible, both within the state and outside the state, A, should be stopped from doing this, and B, should be called to account.
I met the Guptas quite soon after they'd arrived, because a friend of mine from university had become part of their company. And they were really simple people, and they were very hospitable. And I remember Atul was like a bouncy, jolly chap. You gotta come work for me, you gotta come work for me. And I thought, hell no. The family was certainly not from upper class stock. There were people who dragged themselves up with bootstraps.
I come to South Africa in 1993. Democracy was peeking over the horizon, and there was much hope in this country. I was excited to be investing here.
I want to welcome Mr. Atul Gupta, our chairman, who's spending much time out of the country. It's very good to have him here tonight.
Their father was very ambitious for his three sons, and those three sons were the oldest, Ajay Gupta, who's regarded as the patriarch or the brains behind the family. Then the middle brother, Atul, he was the outgoing one. He was the one who scouted for networks and opportunities. And then there was the baby son called Tony or Rajesh Gupta. Then of course there's the mother, and she's the matriarch. They say everything they do for her. They came here as traders. They sold shoes out of the boot of the car, and when they got here, it was pretty clear that Jacob Zuma was a rising force in South Africa.
votes received by Comrade Jacob Zuma, 2,329.
Mbeki was on his way out. So they began to read the cards and worked out that Jacob Zuma was going to be president. And how did they get to know him? Well, they got to know his children first. The daughter was put onto the board of Sahara Computers. It is regarded as the first company on which they built all of these others.
It's Tanukolo Chika from Million Guardian. So I've just forwarded you the email. Could you please have a look and see if you guys are able to assist us?
As President Zuma rises, their businesses also, they grow. They become major players.
Oh, is it? Super. Sure, bye.
We started digging more and more into what were the politicians exactly, linked to. Why are the Guptas behaving the way that they're behaving?
The end of year is a good time to look back and reflect on our achievements. For our family, the Oak Bay Group family, with over 5,000 family members, we have worked on a wide range of projects in many different parts of South Africa. No one can ever see the entirety of our work, but as a group, we only continue to move forward and grow.
The Guptas were really able to find their way into state contracts through a back door, and they were involved long before we saw them there. They were able to come into a lot of state contracts, to start benefiting from those contracts by acting as what they call a business development partner for Regiment's capital.
A buffalo on its own is strong, formidable. But even a buffalo needs time to realize its potential.
Now, Regiment's was one of the largest and most successful black-owned consulting and financial advisory firms in South Africa. They received a lot of contracts. It was well known that they donated to the ANC and that they were politically connected.
Progress is inevitable. Regiments enabling progress.
When Zuma was elected president, he appointed me as the head of the South African Secret Service. The Guptas had acquired Shiva uranium mine, and the Americans were very concerned, and we found it a justifiable reason to recommend a full intelligence investigation into the Gupta family. So I did meet the president, and that meeting didn't go down very well. The president, in no uncertain terms, explained why he disagreed with us. He explained his long relationship with the Guptas, how they helped him when he was in trouble, the relationship between his son and the Guptas, and essentially he said that he doesn't think there's a basis for investigation. In the intelligence services, when you have a disagreement with your principal, and this is not the first disagreement, there were other disagreements, the correct thing to do is to tender resignation.
All of it, when you look at it, has been very neatly taken care of. And the capturing of the security cluster was priority number one. It's so untransparent, it's so opaque, and it makes so little actual sense.
as the story broke that the dignitaries attending a function in South Africa had landed at the Waterkloof Air Force Base, we were just as surprised. We do not understand how an aircraft would be allowed to land at a military base.
When the Guptas landed their aircraft at Waterkloof, that is designated a national key point. It was such a fuck you, landing that plane at Waterkloof. You know, it really was. That show of power was too much.
They flew people from their home state and flown down to South Africa where they didn't have visas, they didn't have clearance, they didn't even want an immigration stamp, and that's sparked off a lot of public outrage. Indian business families, they have this tradition of doing these huge extravagant bashes and do's for anything. And if it's a wedding, it's like the event of a lifetime. The Guptas are known for very, very extravagant weddings.
Of your connections to President Jacob Zuma?
I don't think so at all. Some unknown reason are trying to create this controversy, believe me.
I think one of the defining moments in the history of democratic South Africa was the landing at Waterkloof. This moment of overreach where they flexed so much muscle, they strained their biceps so massively they actually tore through their clothing. And we got a peek at how this actually works. That sort of is where the fence started to open, and we all walked in and started to investigate these guys as much as we could.
My name is being used wrongly. My family is being undermined, even by the very honorable members who don't ask as to what actually happened. And I feel very aggrieved, I must tell you for the first time. I've been convicted, painted black, called the first-class corrupt man on facts that are not tested. I take exception.
He has always behaved the same way he's behaving, with very low morals, questionable standards of integrity, thrives in chaos.
A struggle hero, Robben Island, MK, all of those, struggle credentials, and well respected in certain quarters. There was a problem in those early 90s when a lot of people came back from exile or came out in the open, people who were underground. A certain script began to develop. You've been in exile, you haven't been able to accumulate anything, your children, whatever. Let me send your children to pay for your kids to go to school. You want a holiday cottage, use my holiday cottage. And people came to be absorbed into a very wealthy, may I use the word bourgeoisie?
Are you friends with the Guptas? Are the Guptas influencing you in running the government?
No.
They are not influencing me. I know the Guptas. My son is partner with them.
The first story that I did with the Guptas was to dig into their share registers, to try and figure out the structure of their companies, the beneficial ownership, and how it all worked. One of the things that we started to do was to map the way in which Duduzane Zuma featured in the Gupta Empire. And what we found is that although he wasn't by any means the controlling shareholder in any of those companies, he was kind of cut in each one of their significant deals. The first deal is in mid-2008. And as Zuma's political star rises, you see him being cut into more and more and more deals, just taking a slice the whole way along.
I met the Guptas many years ago. I came across them. They happened to be in the vicinity. At that point, they were in the house, meeting with my father, and like many people I've met in that space, I met them.
So you met them through your father?
That's correct, sir.
Zuma and the Guptas are very good judges of character, and they understand ambition, a certain type of ambition, very, very well. They can see people, pick them out, and know. Duduzane was the key to the whole castle. Get Duduzane, everything runs through him.
We all talking that he's a son of President Zuma. But I want to reveal with you many of the things. This young boy, since beginning with us, since beginning. And he worked even 16 to 18 hours daily. He go himself to all mines, all places. He don't sit in an air-conditioned room and just count the money or do this.
What do you, Duduzane Zuma, think the Guptas wanted from you?
I don't think they wanted anything from me. I think they liked me as I liked them. I think I'm a likable guy.
You don't look back and say, maybe they wanted me because I'm the son of the president?
I look back and I think I'm glad I met these guys and I'm glad we are where we are today.
As investigative journalists are pushing out more and more information, the Gupta's decision to get into the media business was quite smart. They had their own newspaper, The New Age. They had their own TV station, ANN7. It gives them a platform to provide their version of the facts.
Today we're joined by a very special guest, the president of the ANC, the head of state, the commander of the armed forces, Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma, the president of the Republic of South Africa. Welcome, sir, to ANN7.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
President Zuma would tell me as editor about how the editorial policy should be. He would say that he didn't want an out-and-out propaganda station. He wanted there to be a very positive approach as far as the ANC was concerned, and more specifically the coterie around him in the ANC. And also he wanted his rivals, both within the ANC and outside, to be featured, but featured in a negative light. And he said that it should not be direct, it should be subtle. Only then would people give this station any credibility. And he needed a station like this, which, unlike the other stations, would sing his praises.
When you went there, it was just half-assed, half-baked. People didn't know their stuff. The production standards were poor.
Hello and welcome to ANN7. My name is Africa Gola and welcome to the Nightcap. Let's go to the headlines.
With the United Nations Organization's stabilization mission, the movement is Jagger. It's jacking, sorry. May we go down, please? Apologies. Can we just sustain the rolling nicely?
Please raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
They'd voted Jacob Zuma in as president of the country. Shortly after that, we began to feel the consequences of the economic meltdown, 2007-2008 meltdown. When you are having to rev up an economy as we had to, investment in infrastructure is one of the smartest things that we do, and I drove that.
We will undertake the largest program of public investment in infrastructure in this country's history.
The economy needed a huge number of interventions, and that was commonly done by the state via its state-owned enterprises. That also fitted in with the government's notion that, and it was a Keynesian notion, that if the government invests in the economy and just doesn't follow austerity, it becomes job creating, it promotes growth, and we had had many, many years of austerity.
We'll expand and improve railways, public transport, and energy generation.
What we didn't pick up is that the shysters on the sideline were looking at those figures of investment, of infrastructure investment with starry eyes. I knew what was going to happen, and he was waiting the moment to do it. When Malusi Gigaba came in, it was very clear that he was coming in on instructions to change the whole thing. The Department of Public Enterprises has custodianship as a shareholder of some of the major state-owned enterprises in South Africa, including energy production, freight rail, airways. These state-owned enterprises are the pulse of the economy.
Ajay Gupta was quite a sharp guy, so he worked out what state policy was and where the procurement money was largest. So really it was about looking where's the big public money being spent, how do we get into that?
So Transnet is basically our state rail operator. In a country as big as South Africa and with as many mines in South Africa, basically nothing moves unless Transnet moves it. They had to acquire a huge number of new locomotives. This was supposedly going to make rail transport more reliable, it was going to make it faster, and it was going to sort of persuade people that instead of putting cargo onto trucks, they should put it onto rail. You know, the scale of the project, it's not just big for South Africa, it was a big project globally. So you had huge multinational companies bidding for this massive, massive project.
Malusi Gigaba was one of the enablers. He appointed Gupta lieutenants into key state-owned entities' positions.
The minister at the time, he appointed Brian Molefe as the chief executive officer. And then as the chief financial officer, you have Anaj Singh coming in.
These were the guys who are closely linked with the Guptas, and they opened doors for the Guptas.
Key people along the way tweaked the rules so that the outcome would be that you had a huge part of the contract going to the Chinese state rail company. The tragedy is that the bidder that probably should have won, Mitsui, Japanese company, they would have manufactured most of the locomotives in South Africa, it seems like companies like Mitsui, who had very good bids and who in some cases were cheaper, were intentionally cut out. So because of Transnet's growth strategy and the sheer size of these contracts, it really allows consulting companies to come in at this point. You've got the global consulting giant McKinsey getting into bed with politically connected local company regiments. McKinsey and regiments each get over R1 billion worth of consulting contracts. Regiments just so happen to then pay half of their amount to a series of letterbox companies controlled by Salim Essa, the Gupta's very close business partner. By 2015, the big money had been spent, the big contracts had been signed at Transnet, at the rail agency. What you see is Brian Molefe and Anoj Singh being sort of picked up out of Transnet and moved across into Eskom, our state power utility. You know, in 2015, Eskom was already in crisis. We'd had years of power cuts. It's one of the biggest companies in South Africa, and the amount of debt that it has poses an existential threat to the economy. When Brian Molefe and Anoj Singh come into Eskom, it's at a point where we really need executives coming in who are going to recognize the problem and who are going to start dealing with it. Instead, what we have is we have executives coming in who seem to be distracted by other things.
We are in the mix in China. It's bloody live. If we use that one as our... Soon after the 2014 elections, President Jacob Zuma makes this mysterious trip to Russia.
Russia's state nuclear agency has submitted a bid for a nuclear power project in South Africa.
The investigative journalist managed to actually figure out that he went there to sign some sort of nuclear deal to build nuclear stations.
We're talking about hundreds of billions. In fact, over R1 trillion, I think, would be the ultimate cost of these nuclear reactors. We understand now how the Guptas work. Effectively, they'd want a piece of almost every single procurement initiative on the back of this vast infrastructure deal. One of the big schemes in there is the fuel to generate the nuclear reactors themselves.
The president's son is a director in the same company that actually bought the uranium mine. So in essence, they were lining themselves up in this nuclear deal.
I just want to find out, what is your stand on nuclear, and do you think that South Africa can actually afford it?
Do you think it can't?
Even if you put, for an example, other types of clear energy, will not reach the percentage that the nuclear will bring to solve the problem of energy in this country once and for all. And that's the reason why we're pursuing it. It's an important kind of energy that you need.
There's no business plan, but Zuma's cabinet, of course, as a president, they approved this thing. National Treasury was ultimately the one that had to decide. Tension rose to a level where Treasury was seen as an enemy within the state.
The president criticized me for not finalizing the financial aspects of the proposed nuclear deal with Russia. And he also said he was not happy that I was not doing what I was supposed to have done a long time ago, so that he could have something to present when he meets with his counterpart, President Putin, for their one-on-one meeting.
Zuma announces the axing of Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene and appoints the little-known Des van Rooyen.
He was doing a good job. Why go and fire your finance minister?
I have decided to appoint Mr. David Douglas van Rooyen, Minister of Finance.
So Des van Rooyen arrives at National Treasury with his 3 advisors. And one of them was a well-known Gupta associate. His cell phone places him around the Gupta compound when the presidential announcement on his appointment was made. We exposed an email with the title that says, "Gents, finally." They are celebrating that they now have keys to the vault, which is the finance department, National Treasury. And they detail what needs to be done.
The markets were just thrown into the abyss. We lost about 500 billion just in currency. We see how unemployment ratcheted up after that. We saw how confidence was lost in the country. We saw how investments stopped flowing. And this isn't just affecting rich people who are involved. This is to do with the lives of every South African who wants to have a decent life on earth.
Some of the richest people in South Africa took matters into their own hands. They met with President Jacob Zuma. We don't know what happened in that meeting, but
he lasted just 4 days. David van Rooyen, the relatively unknown lawmaker sworn in as finance minister on Thursday, has been replaced by Pravin Gordhan, who previously held the post for 5 years.
Our government is very acutely aware of the financial impact this has had on those who are invested in the economy.
Pravin Gordhan's mere return as finance minister has widely been welcomed as a confidence booster.
the story of former Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas. I had sent questions to the Guptas, and then I got a long response from their lawyers saying that if I go ahead and print, they'll drag me to court personally and they'll drag the paper to court. Looked at it, and I got this feeling of satisfaction because they were not disputing anything but threatening legal action. We went to print, but Sunday was a most difficult day. ANC spokesperson at that time, Zizi Kodwa, issued a statement saying that we're writing gossip masquerading as news. I'll never forget that. Then you try and go back and try and think where did I miss it? Am I wrong, etc.? Did these people mislead me? But we were talking to different people. Came Monday or Tuesday, Mcebisi Jonas confirmed the story at a press conference.
Members of the Gupta family offered me the position of Minister of Finance to replace the then Minister Nene. I rejected this out of hand. The basis of my rejection of their offer is that it makes a mockery of our hard-earned democracy.
Of course, not many people were happy with our work. Our phones became compromised. The editor at the Sunday Times, Bongani himself, was warned that what you guys are doing is attracting attention. But we knew that our state coffers were being ripped off. It was getting hot in the Gupta compound. President Jacob Zuma was feeling the heat himself. The ones that were looting within the ANC were feeling the heat.
And the media were not welcome, but security guards becoming confrontational when journalists didn't move away from the property.
Be careful, gentlemen.
Of what?
Of what?
Are you threatening us? Sir, does that count as a threat?
Somebody decided we need big guns who can change the narrative.
London has become the reputation laundering capital of the world. This is where you come where you need to be washed clean of your sins. In early 2016, Bell Pottinger won an account in South Africa to look after Oak Bay Investments, which was the holding company for the Gupta family.
So they introduced this term, white monopoly capital, to deflect attention from the Guptas. And of course, it worked because the most easiest thing to do here in South Africa is to racialize issues because of the apartheid history. So it gains, traction by social media and bots.
But it was really a clever way for the Guptas to kind of rebrand their involvement in state capture, to rebrand it as they were these disruptors who were coming in to kind of challenge the powerful economic elite. So what you saw happening was journalists being kind of branded as these, the servants, the lapdogs of white monopoly capital.
South Africa, economics is charged with racial overtones. So these were not new ideas, but it was just the deployment of these ideas which were used to distract against claims that Zuma was corrupt, inept, and was benefiting his friends. The way that argument was pushed out was through Facebook posts and Twitter memes.
You were the man who went out to South Africa to secure this deal.
Yes.
This...
Tim Bell is perhaps the best known figure in British public relations. Unrepentant, enthusiastic even about taking on, difficult geopolitical clients. People who had served in Pinochet's government, the wife of Bashar al-Assad, Asma Assad. All of these people had Tim Bell's services.
I went out to go and meet the Guptas to discuss whether they needed public relations help or not. And we talked for several hours and had a meeting to discuss what we would do, and came back. And I came back and I said to James Henderson, who was the chief executive, it's a very interesting piece of business, but we can't handle it because there's a conflict of interest.
The problem with that is, you see, that we have an email that you sent on the 18th of January 2016, in which you said the trip was a great success.
Yes, it was a great success.
And we would put forward a deal whereby we would earn £100,000 a month plus costs, and I will oversee this and make further reports. That's a direct conflict of what you've just said.
It's not. It's exactly the same as what I said.
But
you can try to attack me all you like, but it's not going to work. I had nothing to do with getting this account.
But obviously you're a very popular man tonight.
I mean,
but can I just say that one of the key things that seems to have been said about this.
I picked up my phone and I noticed these very weird images of me, very clearly meant to demean and shame me. The thing that I realize now is that it worked, because I kept quiet about it for months, and I would call up my family and say, hey, it's not me in those pictures, because clearly it impacted and it hurt, and I needed people to know that it wasn't me on the lap of a billionaire, Johan Rupert, or in his bed. Those were some of the other images. Women journalists are often attacked and demeaned in these ways when they or we say things that people don't like. It's a very easy revenge tactic.
It's quite a twisted way of taking a genuine issue which many black people of this country actually struggle with and need to see a change around it. But somebody took their struggle in their twisted way to their own benefit, to their own interest, instead of actually opening up the market for the true economic transformation of many black people.
From there, things start to kind of get out of hand. And what it really gets turned into is this idea that not just the Guptas, but also Zuma are really victims. And it kind of becomes quite a vitriolic and quite a nasty campaign.
I'm Sam Soul. I'm the public face of the evil conspiracy of wiping out the capitals. I'm the kind of face that gets picked on along with other media figures like Ferial. So I've got Public Paul Jika from the Sunday Times. They have also been doing great work. The Sunday Times, together with our Mugani, was publishing stuff about
We had started the meeting, and then all of a sudden, hell broke loose. Well-known President Jacob Zuma's supporters, they interrupted the whole town hall meeting. They stormed the place, caused chaos. Didn't want this meeting to go ahead. We couldn't talk about state capture.
This is part of the colonial attack on our people. You stole our land, you stole our mines, you stole our banks, you continue with racism, and there's been mass murder in this country by white people. They continue to attack us. They continue to attack us today.
Basically threatening all of us as journalists. I mean, police had to be called in because they were very violent, and the aim was to basically squash our freedom of speech.
One of the most important institutions during this period was the Office of the Public Protector, which is basically there to protect people against maladministration from the state.
When governance fails, things fall apart.
Advocate Thuli Madonsela was approached to conduct a systematic investigation into the involvement of the Gupta family in state affairs, as well as the awarding of contracts to companies linked to the family.
We were graced and blessed at that time to have a person called Thuli Madonsela, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, who was the public protector. She showed such leadership.
Without good governance, the constitutional dream is a pipe dream.
She actually finds that Brian Molefe, he had traveled to the Gupta compound not less than 19 times, meaning that there were things that were being planned at the Gupta compound.
I do not agree that the board should resign over this matter. I will take responsibility as the CEO.
There were some serious consequences after the report that Thuli Madonsela released. Brian Molefe resigned as a CEO at Eskom. In many ways, her conclusions lead to an establishment of the state capture inquiry.
So that's in 2016. And unfortunately, no one does anything. The great tragedy is that in that gap, huge amounts of money have left, people who should have been arrested, and also evidence is being destroyed.
I've asked them about this, and Treasury and the Department of Transport. What are some of the plans that are being proposed to fix the problem, right? So,
a number of journalists, we realized that this was a systemic collapse of state institutions. It was not corruption that was isolated. I'm talking about the revenue services, police, state security, the National Prosecuting Authority.
Part of state capture in South Africa was not just the extraction of funds from institutions like Eskom or Denel or whatever it is. It was also the capture and the almost decapitation of the relevant law enforcement institutions. You had a double whammy. You had the freedom to steal, but you also had freedom from prosecution.
Shaun Abrahams was classically an appointment of the era of President Jacob Zuma, where you put into place people who are not the best in their craft in order to create malleable institutions. And that's exactly what's happening with Shaun Abrahams' tenure at the NPA.
They go after the finance minister, Pravin Gordhan. But the case doesn't make it to court. But it left so many questions as to why was the NPA so hell-bent on chasing the finance minister. We made concessions and agreements to deliver nuclear, and you have to pay the piper. National Treasury was saying, we can't afford this.
The president went into endgame because he needed to get a nuclear deal signed. and he got reckless.
When Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan was recalled from his international roadshow, he received a one-line statement from President Zuma saying, "Come back." Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan was fired last night, and so too was his Deputy Minister Mcebisi Jonas. Our new Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba, who is a Zuma loyalist.
He learnt our fate from the TV screen, not from any phone call, nor from any chat or conversation, but the TV screen spoke to us. So that was, I'm sure, as interesting for us as it was for you.
Zuma stands down, the people will stand up again. And we will take control back of our country, comrades. Take down! Take down!
Some are saying that about 100 billion rands might be disappeared. 100 billion rands is approximately 8.5 to 9% of total government expenditure.
Many South Africans we meet all over and even don't meet, for their encouragement, for the support, and for the courage that they have given us during the last year and a half when we've been under constant attack in one form or another, while we're trying to do good, honest work for ordinary South Africans. The only thing we're interested in is how 55 million people can become richer, not a few.
You have sacrificed everything we have stood on the altar of corruption, greed, and more greed. And finally, Mr. President, if you had ears to hear and eyes to see, you would step down as Kathy Rehad.
The frustrations go very deep because the next week you still have another corruption story that you are writing. And you can see that the majority of the people of this country are being denied a right to live and a right to have infrastructure, proper running water, proper sanitation. It's absolutely frustrating, demoralizing. Very much demoralizing. You find yourself asking yourself so many questions as to, is there justice in this?
The Guptas didn't invent state capture. Long before they were here, the path had been laid. The Guptas really came in, though, and they perfected it.
What feels so horrific about it, really, is that it feels like the old apartheid days. So much of what we've seen with regard to the Guptas has relied on old apartheid laws and old apartheid setups. The kind of mouthfeel of the whole thing takes you right back into the bad old days.
Not only in South Africa, but in sub-Saharan Africa, every single country inherited institutions that were extractive. When you inherit institutions and they were extractive, it's very easy to fall into the practices of the colonizer. And I think that is part of our problem and what we see today, practices that are not dissimilar from what colonizers were doing. If you're able to do that in something that looks like a democracy, it becomes sustainable. And I think the objective was to establish that state and enable it to continue ad infinitum. If you've got information which may stop that particular decline, it's in everyone's interests that one stops it. I was approached by a person in possession of a hard drive.
Do it again. To be honest, in the last year, there have been times when I've said, I'll never do this again. But then you remind yourself of why you started this whole process. And when you use the logic of why you did it, prevails over any regrets that one might have.
I gave it to Amabungani and Daily Maverick.
My editor, Stefans, and Branko, the editor from Daily Maverick, we kind of went up onto the rooftop of this shopping mall. We kind of put all of our tech, all of our phones, laptops, anything that was electronic, we put it into the car, locked the car, and then walked away and went and stood in the middle of the parking lot. That's sort of where they then said, okay, this is what we've got. This is why we've asked you to come here. We have this thing. We have this leak.
I'm very excited to have this many people in these offices that we pay for.
Let's say roughly 160,000 emails. I'd say once you take out duplications and things, you're going to sit with a total of around 200, maybe a bit more gig altogether.
It's docx's, it's JPEGs, it's videos.
Around about April, early May, we're desperately trying to get the two witnesses to leave the country. There'll be no publication until they're gone. One night, sort of like just before 11, I get a call from Branko. Have you seen the Sunday Times? He said, well, have a look online. The story's broken. Where does this come from? Have you been dealing with others? I said, not me. Definitely not, I haven't. I phoned him and I said, Stan, I said, you've got to leave the country immediately.
It was quite quick. We had to get away. And from time to time when you're away, out of the country, you kind of think, why on earth did I do this?
Is this South Africa's Panama Papers?
Series of explosive emails have been made public in South Africa revealing how the ruling ANC no longer controls the state apparatus.
President Jacob Zuma used to say that, give me proof. Give me proof that the Guptas are corrupt and they're doing something wrong. That's all it became. The emails just said, here's the proof, Mr. President.
So the Gupta leaks are this huge treasure trove. What we figure out from the leaks is that you've got Gupta lieutenants heading up state-owned companies, you've got ministers that are in their pockets, you've got these all expenses paid trips to India, Dubai. We figure out that the president's son has a residence permit in Dubai. The emails really confirm the inner workings of deals that have been made between Gupta companies and particularly the big state-owned companies Transnet and Eskom. once we had the Gupta leaks, we could see how quickly the Guptas turned one tiny small coal contract that they never should have gotten in the first place because the coal wasn't good enough quality, how they start turning that into a kind of Eskom-wide empire.
When you're talking about the blackouts that we have, all of a sudden Brian Molefe was praising Optimum for delivering coal. Optimum became a superstar that was now keeping our lights on. One instance is a laboratory. They test coal, contracted to Eskom. Their test shows that there's bad coal coming from Optimum. Eskom cut them off, cancelled their contract. The guy had to let go of 80% of his staff simply because they found something wrong with the Gupta's coal. You've got more unemployed people on the streets simply because the Guptas have to be taken care of.
Effectively, what happened at Transnet is you had the company taking a decision to go on this massive capital build project that was going to cost tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of rands over a number of years. It was kind of the biggest game in town, and the Guptas were well aware of that.
Whilst the rhetoric was about the country, about the poor, and about serving everyone, the reality was every single move appeared to be designed to facilitate extraction.
The big beast of capitalism is dying. It's being eaten from the insides. We can see it in the Gupta leaks. Go into the emails, take a look. That's what it looks like. That's what the death of a system looks like. Here's the wedding scam. They stole over 100 million rand from a farm company, an empowerment company that's meant to empower black farmers. They have a dairy company called Estina. Now, this dairy farm is never really meant to do anything.
Ngoba kwakuthiwe lezo zinto fanele zizoyithi zirane yitwa abantu bala Afrika ngithi esazi ngalomsebenzi yabona bawufaka abantu ababele ngaphandle bazobafaka la yabona ukuthi bazodla le imali inkomo zakhona zondile awazikhala kanjani inkomo zingalideli isono lesi singale nangabe ungayi uyobheka akusetshenzwa kanjalo uma usebenza iplaza. Kusho ukuthi imali nje ekufuze usebenza ngayo idliwe ifake egwameni zabo.
So money is filtered through into Dubai bank accounts. Okay, it sits in the Dubai bank accounts. Now they have to hold this big wedding. So what do? They invoice a company in Dubai for 30 million rand, $3 million. The company in Dubai sends the money to a company here. And KPMG helps them register that as an expense. So not only have they stolen the money, but they're also not paying tax on the money that they've stolen.
But you don't see anything wrong in the information, for example, contained in the leaked Gupta emails, that public money was taken from a provincial government in the Free State,
Yes.
which went to a Gupta company. You don't see anything wrong with that.
Who said this, sir?
Well, it's in the emails.
Not in a court of law.
People in big business think they can behave exactly how they want. They can engage in corruption. They can see money from a dairy farm in the Free State going for a Gupta wedding and still get away with murder. We have to be very vigilant about this white monopoly capital frame. Who is McKinsey? Who is KPMG? These are global white monopoly capital companies, right? So we see that most of the collaboration, most of the state capture and so on has been with these companies that meet that definition.
I would say if there's one thing that allowed state capture to flourish, it was secrecy. The Guptas needed offshore companies. They needed places like the UAE, they needed Hong Kong, they needed bank accounts and companies in those places to act as part of the laundry machine. That became part of the crucial architecture of state capture. If one looks at the sort of main era of state capture, what you see is international software companies, and particularly consulting companies, having a very good few years in South Africa. There's an email that bounces around between a bunch of McKinsey consultants. The title of the email is "Brian is Going Nuclear." And what that's a reference to is Brian Molefe, who appears to have bought into the idea of the nuclear deal. This is happening in a context where there is so much skepticism that people have about this nuclear deal. And here you have the McKinsey consultants who you can practically hear them like high-fiving each other over the email.
The shadow elites that I've been charting work in and around these consulting firms, and these kinds of consulting firms are part of the new unaccountable landscape that has taken hold in most places in the world. These kinds of firms have moved primarily from working just in the private sector to also working with states. They have access to the most valuable information. They can fuse state and private power in ways that we have never seen before. What is the essence of a modern democracy? It is the separation of state and private power. What is the essence of a free market? It is competition. They're not interested in competition. They're interested in gaining a foothold and acquiring more and more reach and power. What I've been charting in this new system of power and influence is a new ethics that accompany it. Several years ago, there was a key person who had operated as a lobbyist for very unsavory foreign governments. And he said, you know, shame is for sissies.
Every 5 years, the ANC has an elective conference to vote in a new national executive. In 2017, a huge battle emerged between President Zuma's former wife, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, and Cyril Ramaphosa.
and abuse of office within our own ranks.
Those two represented two forces, the Zuma faction promoting state capture, corruption, and the Cyril Ramaphosa faction trying to get the economy and South Africa back on track.
And the distribution of votes is as follows. Comrade Zuma received 2261 votes. Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa received 244.
I have always been a disciplined member of the ANC. I have therefore come to the decision to resign as President of the Republic with immediate effect.
As soon as former President Jacob Zuma resigns, the Gupta compound is raided, arrest warrants are issued for the Gupta brothers and their well-known associates. Then it was really too late because the Gupta brothers and Tutuzane Zuma were not in the country, they had already left.
I'm taking from what you're saying that AJ Gupta is at this point regarded as a fugitive from justice, is that correct?
He is a fugitive and we are aware of the fact that he's got bodyguards. So even those bodyguards now, they are, breaking the law.
AJ, how are you doing, sir? Good.
Lovely to see you.
When are you going back to South Africa? Any day? The country's looking for you. Huh?
They're not looking.
With a sword.
And in the leaked emails, there are quotes there that you have an apartment in the Burj Khalifa,
yes,
right here in Dubai.
Yes, sir.
And that a house was bought on behalf of your father.
I do not own any property. My father does not own any property in this beautiful country, or beautiful city, should I say.
I hope that because you know the importance of these issues, perhaps you'd allow me a little bit of leniency in asking this question. Mr. Zuma, are you corrupt?
Mr. Nkosi, I'm not corrupt.
Desai Zuma first reporting to the Johannesburg Central Police Station this morning, where he was processed before being brought here.
Are you concerned that you may be, in the end, locked up following all these allegations, going to prison for corruption? Does that cross your mind?
It just crossed my mind now. It's the first time it crossed. So I don't know if you saw it crossing my mind, but it's gone. No.
It doesn't cross.
Why should it? Why it just crossed now? Since you mentioned it now, and I actually saw it crossing, and it's gone.
So it was a brief court appearance, probably 20 minutes that he was in the court. We found out that he's facing charges of corruption as well as conspiracy to corruption. The state did not oppose bail. There was an agreement reached with the defense team. And he's also agreed to hand in his passport.
There are robust processes that have been developed relating to PFMA compliance in Transnet specifically.
So that's where you get 5 billion rands going to Hong Kong for the locomotives. That's the robust processes. That's the free bonus, am I right? to the Guptas and so on, I mean, we'll call you back for that. But if that's the robust process you're talking about, it's weaker than a blade of grass outside.
So those are the procurement processes.
No, of course, as CFO, you knew nothing about that. Am I right?
Of
You just donated 5 billion rands of South Africa's public money.
The 5 billion rand, I'm not aware of, sir.
You're not aware. All South Africans are aware. At least we understand what your criteria for robustness is. Is self-preservation, trumping, conscience, and ethics. In other words, you have to survive at any cost. You don't feel any qualms about that. You don't think you want to change your tack. You don't think you've been poorly advised, with due respect to your lawyers.
The Zondo Commission, it was such a long time coming, but it felt so important at that point to have a platform where the state itself could finally come and confirm you weren't crazy, you guys had it right all along, and here's the detail.
Today marks the first day of the first session of the hearings of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state.
Ministers could be removed if they did not cooperate. If you don't cooperate, we're going to remove you. So they were using, they had real authority.
That's the Gupta family you are talking about.
I'm talking about the Gupta family.
Yes, yes.
One of the Gupta brothers walked into the room and sat down. He said emphatically that I must become Minister of Finance because that is what we want. He also said that if I worked with them, I would become very rich, and that he could immediately offer me 600 million.
I think one of the bankers described as using a banking system as a laundromat to wash dirty money. Had you had occasion to raise these issues with your clients?
I'm unaware of, I personally am unaware of interactions with those clients in the context of saying, we have this information which we wish to share with you.
All right. What is that show?
That's R1 million, exactly. I packed the amounts on many occasions myself.
For whom?
For the ruling party, Chair. Every single contract was tainted with bribes and corruption.
1 million
All right.
exactly.
Okay.
That's bloody monopoly money.
Yes, sir.
Stop there.
Why is he referring to it as monopoly money?
He said to me in two phrases. He says, number one, it's just monopoly money so we can get the monopoly. And the other phrase was monopoly money because it's just playing money. You're playing with people.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Okay.
I was conned into coming in and setting up a station for what I believe was a mafia-like operation, for setting up a propaganda station which I did not want to in the first place. I've never been as scared as that in my entire life, and believe me, I've covered civil war, I've covered wars and riots, but those last few days and hours in South Africa were the most scary in my life. I actually thought that I would die, that I would not see my family again.
At the end of the meeting, Mr. Gupta repeated that they had information on me, and if I suggested that the meeting had occurred, they would kill me. He said that, I quote, "You must understand that we are in control of everything."
What he has done was to auction executive authority. And now the next president who comes is going to inherit an empty office in terms of authority.
Everyone was so excited when Zuma finally was going to come and testify at the Zondo Commission, because we really thought it would be this opportunity to kind of grill him about every scandal that he had put us through as a country for the past decade. For his supporters who were in the hall, it was about seeing him being defiant in the face of those allegations.
Do you swear that the evidence you are going to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Mr. Zuma, I understand from your counsel that before any questions can be put to you, you would like to state your side of the story. This is the opportunity that I am giving you to do so before any questions can be put to you.
In 1990, there were 3 intelligence organizations that met to discuss me and had a plan to begin a process of character assassination of Zuma. That's the beginning of the process that has put me where I am today.
Jacob Zuma spends several hours saying that state capture was nothing but part of this plot that had, been continuing for decades to get him out of power.
What made Comrade Nwako to behave the way he did here? Saying that I've auctioned the country.
What he has done was to auction executive authority.
He's carrying out an instruction. He was recruited when he was a student in Lesotho to be a spy.
Please, let's not clap.
This is not a court of law. This doesn't work in the same way. And so what Zuma was really able to do was to come there and spin another story, spin another alternative universe. I mean, I want to say the facts just flew out the window, but the facts weren't even there to begin with.
Did Mr. Gupta enjoy, as he appears to have said he did, government support in the New Age project?
I don't know really.
Do you have any comment in relation to that?
No. No comment. I'm not sure. I
don't know anything
I don't
about
recall it
Yes.
for now.
Together with just the legal team, we have a duty to raise concerns.
Yes.
When we see a development in the manner in which our client is being cross-examined.
Minister Chibani was concerned he had not done anything wrong. Do you know anything about that statement?
No.
I'm pleading with you, sir, to really check whether your process has not become a political process where the left hand does not know what the right hand is. My client has instructed me that we will take no further part in these proceedings.
We adjourn.
Viva the people's president, viva! The narrative that Zuma is corrupt must continue. Enough is enough. Bazothi ngesinye isikhathi ngiyahlanya uma ngibakhipha one by one.
It's been almost 10 years of unabated looting. They estimate that it's close to $1 trillion that the whole state capture debacle cost the country. A country that has got the highest unemployment rate, the highest rate of people who live in poverty. $1 trillion could have changed their lives.
With living under conditions of poverty, not having a job, is that those are forms of structural violence that translate into traumatized individual members of our society.
That's so true.
That is what can lead one to asking the question, what is the point
of living?
When it comes to particularly some of the multinationals, all we've really gotten so far is their controlled spin. What we really need is for them to be brought under oath and interrogated properly about some of the answers that they've given.
Be it business people, be it politicians, those that we put in power should be held accountable by any means, and we should be very critical of them.
Journalism's gone through a rough time everywhere, but in the last few years, I think we've really kind of felt our importance. We've realized how important it is to have really thorough investigative journalism. It was one of the few things that held democracy together, that held it all together until the other parts of the state could be uncaptured, could recover.
you.